Hey y'all, Uncle Paul here, and it's time to get in the arena with Uncle Paul. Stay tuned.
These words will never let me go. Oh no, these words will never let me go.
The Houston metro area has over 7 million people, and yet only one unfiltered source of news. And that's Grizzy's Hood News. Grizzy Castillo has built a platform of dedicated followers, helping her solve cases, find missing people, and cover stories that the mainstream networks just won't cover. When my nephew went missing, Grizzy was the first and only for the longest time to help us. She's become a pillar in the community, and now she's got a podcast, Hood News Unfiltered with Grizzy, which you can watch Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. on Houston CW or anytime at grizzyshoodnews.com. Grizzy works tirelessly to bring us content, sometimes funny, sometimes heartbreaking, and sometimes dangerous, which is why we have to support her sponsors. Go to grizzyshoodnews.com and find out how you can advertise, follow her on all the major social media platforms, or watch her anytime at grizzyshoodnews.com. If it's real news, it's Hood News. That's grizzyshoodnews.com. Hey y'all, it's Paul Vasquez, better known as Uncle Paul, on social media. And this is the first episode of In the Arena with Uncle Paul. Now, this episode was recorded a couple days ago. Since then, we have discovered that the body that I mentioned in the podcast was not in fact my nephew. God's will, not mine, be done today. But I thoroughly enjoyed recording this, and I thoroughly enjoy being back in the podcasting world, telling stories. I've missed it so much. Thank you for your patience. If you're a listener of my former podcast, if you're a brand new follower, please subscribe, support the show. Look in the description for ways you can support the show, including visiting some of my sponsors and some folks that have helped me along the way that I advertise for to pay back, like Grizzy Castillo over at Grizzy's Hood News. So, y'all, welcome to the inaugural podcast of In the Arena with Uncle Paul. If you like our theme song, download These Words by Ari Zizzo on all streaming platforms. And I guess I'll just start over. Audience, I've got David Keck on the line from the Surviving Podcast, who has agreed to interview me for my inaugural episode of my new podcast, In the Arena with Uncle Paul. Just to kind of set the intention of what I want the show to be and to explain where I've been the past few years between my last podcast and this one. Some of you will know, some of you won't know, some of you will know pieces. So I kind of just want to fill in the gaps and, like I said, set the intention for what I want this podcast to be. And since I admire David, he is a friend, a fellow podcaster, and he's really good at what he does. So that's why I wanted him to do my interview. I look really big compared to you. I don't know what happened, but I'm like super big. But we will let David take it over. Hey, David.
Hey, I'm so honored to be here. I follow you. I admire you. We've become great friends. I love when we connect, and so I'm honored to be a part of this and the new platform that you're building.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And just to let the audience in on it, this is probably like the 25th time we're trying to record. So if it seems like we're just a little, we might be, honestly, I'm just, to acknowledge my feeling, use a feeling word as they say in therapy, I'm just a little frustrated with technology. But we're just going to push through the frustration and feel the frustration. Yay, feelings. And just keep it moving because David only has so much time in his day. So, shoot, David, what you got for me?
Well, I would love to hear, and I know that we'll get further into this as we talk, but you had your first platform, your first podcast, and you had an agenda and a goal with that, and then things just happen in life that has now led you to the new podcast that you're starting. So I guess throughout this whole interview, we're going to be discussing those steps and those things. And so take us back to the original podcast, the original platform, the goal with it, and what led you to In the Arena.
I love that question. So, God, my times. I'm horrible with time, just FYI. But 2018, the beginning of 2019, I'm trying to remember when I launched the first podcast because it's been a minute. I want to say I launched the first podcast 2019-ish. And the reason for that is because I was managing 2 behavioral health clinics and I loved my job. They weren't paying me at all, I mean, they were paying me, but in DFW, practice managers make six figures. I was making $17 an hour. Um, but it wasn't about the money. It fed my spirit in such a way that, like, I loved everything I did. There's that old adage, if you love your job, you won't work a day in your life. I believe that because I loved my patients, I loved the providers, I loved my staff. I loved what we did, and the clinics kind of crashed and burned through no fault of ours. It's more of a corporate thing, but that desire, like to still help people and sit with stories, was still with me, and I needed something to feed that kind of outlet. And so I decided to launch Disinfecting Sunlight. And that title comes from, sunlight is the best disinfectant, which is another one of my favorite quotes. Um, Interestingly enough, that podcast was also inspired by my brother's murder at the age of 19. And I didn't know at the time that even though I'd called it Disinfecting Sunlight, I had no idea that the number 19 tarot card is the sunlight, it's sun. Um, do 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 do. So yeah, funny enough. So that podcast kind of became about recovering, and most of it was drug recovery, but the theme was recovering from life, whatever life throws at us, kind of like surviving. Your podcast, similarly. Um, that was my goal, and then I was talking about recovering, and I wasn't doing a lot of recovering. The back end I was using a lot, and as the show kept growing, the using kept getting like more and more, and eventually I just stopped recording because I was using so much, and I would try and come back and do it again. It just wasn't consistent, and there was a lot of attention that the show was getting, and I loved that because I really honestly I had no budget. It was just it was not so much about the technology, but about the interviews, and it was getting traction. And I think maybe some of that kind of scared me. Um, but having said that, 2020, no, 2019, oh God, 2021 came along, and it's 2021, and I decided to relaunch the show because I was in treatment. I was going to relaunch the show. I was really looking forward to it. It was a similar episode. My friend Nikki interviewed me. The episode is still up. She interviewed me, but as we're preparing for that interview, my nephew goes missing. So we start talking about recovering, and then it's also about my missing nephew. In that few years, we now know that my nephew not only was missing, he was murdered, and we're still looking for his body. And that's where this new podcast kind of comes in because along the way, um, I got into treatment, finished my 90-day treatment program. I I am currently almost 6 months sober, just a couple days away. And along that 3-year journey, I've become an influencer on TikTok, which I hate that label so much. Um, but when I say it, people know what I mean. But I've got a platform. Never saw that happening. And I've met people that need their stories told. So I'm just trying to think when I was, because I need this outlet. I need to talk. I love to talk, but I hate small talk. So if I'm going to talk, it has to be big universe, big picture kind of stuff. Um, so I thought about bringing the old podcast back, but I'm not the old person. um, Another favorite quote of mine is, "You can never go home again." So I wanted to start new podcast, new Paul, like from where I'm at now, instead of looking back. So here is In the Arena with Uncle Paul, and I am calling it a show for survivors, storytellers, and justice seekers. So it's going to be a blend of all of that. You're going to hear some recovery. You're going to hear some folks with just some amazing stories, and you're going to hear a lot of I need help with my missing or murdered loved one because that's just where I'm at right now in my journey and with all the people I've met and from what I do on social media. I even have a handle now. They call me Uncle Paul. I did not name myself Uncle Paul. My followers named me Uncle Paul, and I'm grateful for that. So that's why it's In the Arena with Uncle Paul. And that does come from one of my favorite quotes, which is attributed to Brene Brown, but it's Thomas Jefferson. It's not the critic who counts. The credit goes to the man who's in the arena. That's just paraphrasing. But when we're in the arena, we're going to talk hard talk. We're gonna talk. We're gonna cry. We're gonna feel our feelings. Yay! And yeah, in the arena, it's going to be an honest, organic, authentic show about, like I said, survivors, storytellers, and justice seekers like yourself. And like,
Yeah. As being a follower and a viewer and now, a friend and having listened to you and also even had just personal off the record conversations with you, I relate to you so much. And watching you grow into this new Paul, I think that you made the best decision to let the first podcast be to have a closure on that and move into something different and something new because like you said, you have grown. What I admire about you and I see so much in myself is we always want to put other people first. We
mm,
just want to help other people. Like I wake up every day and I know that you do too. And my goal is how can I keep people from never feeling the way that I have felt so many times in my life? And during that, sometimes I lose how to take care of myself. One of the analogies we had discussed on one of our many times to attempt to record because of technology is the whole, when you're in a plane and plane's going down, you've got to put your mask on first. And I got to see in real time when you realize I have to put my mask on first. And and now there's a whole new grand Uncle Paul, So tell us a little bit about your perspective on putting your mask on first.
you know, um, it's funny, not funny that we're recording this on this day. This day last year, or this time last year, maybe not the specific date, but definitely during beginning of February, I tried taking my life. Um, because on January 31st, well, let me rewind just a little bit. So AJ went missing. I've kind of nearly killed myself, and I mean that both metaphorically and literally, trying to find him, trying to get justice. I, like you said, I was trying to put the mask of my family on, while I'm still battling an addiction and trying to manage a platform and manage the social justice and protest and do all this while battling an IV meth addiction. Not just, a little smoke here or there, like hardcore. I'm trying to do all of that. And somehow I managed to do it. But um, like it was getting worse and worse. And as the journey kept going and the journey's still going, um, it started just wearing me out physically, emotionally, mentally. I mean, I was self medicating, but the self medication wasn't working anymore. Um, and my ex husband, who's a good friend, he saw me dying, effectively dying, and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna take you to Puerto Rico. Let's just get out of here for a little bit. Let's get you some air. Take you to an island, a beautiful man, and let's just go and just get out of here." And so we did, and it was great. And I stayed with him in Puerto Rico for a week, and then we went back to his place in Dallas, and I just kind of dried out. But I was running out of money, so I went back home to Albuquerque, where I was living at the time, on my nephew's birthday, December 10th. It would have been his 21st birthday. And the moment I walked into my house, it just like that spirit of using, I call it the demon, just kind of took over me. And I just saw myself doing things like I often did, calling my dealer, shooting up, all that stuff. And something was very different when I used that day. And I just felt it. Like I didn't feel the euphoria. I didn't feel none of the reasons why I enjoy using. I didn't feel any of that. My back started hurting. So I laid down and I laid down for like 2 days. I was working at the time, and um, I remember getting up because it was a Sunday. It was late Sunday night, and I was going to work the following morning. I worked from home, but I just got up to go to the restroom, and I just realized, because I'm older. My bladder just looks this big, so I'm always, going. And I just realized I haven't gone in like almost 2 days, and that's not typical for me. And I felt the back pain, and I'm just something told me something like no, no. I remember it was my grandfather. I heard my grandfather's voice. He's like, "Mijo, go to the hospital." So I call a friend in recovery, and I'm like, because I'm still high. I'm like, can you take me to the hospital? Something's just not right. I wasn't in. I mean, my back was hurting, but it wasn't excruciating. But I just knew something was off. And I get to the hospital. This is still during COVID, so we've got our mask on. I get to the hospital. They make me urinate, and it's black. Oh, look like this, but darker, a little darker. So my kidneys had completely shut down. Now, that's a long story. I'm going to make it a little concise. I promised myself, I promised AJ as I was laying in that hospital bed all by myself, effectively dying, because my kidneys weren't working. And I told him, because I could feel him, I could feel all like my ancestors around me. And I said, AJ, if you save me from this, I will go to treatment. Um, and I knew in my heart that he would, like I just felt it. So 3 weeks later, I walk into um, Fresenius, one of those dialysis clinics, to get outpatient dialysis, and they're checking me in, and there's all these people in there. And I told them, I remember telling them, don't get used to seeing me here because I'm not going to be here for very long. And they looked at me like I was crazy, because people don't tend to leave dialysis. Um, and 3 weeks later, I walked out of there completely healed. So I knew I needed to get into treatment. This is a very long answer, but went to one. Thank you, honey. I went to one treatment center. They sent me away. This time last year, I tried taking my life for the first time with an insane amount of meth, almost 2 grams, which for me in one sitting is insane. It's a lot. So it didn't work. I tried 4 other treatment centers in New Mexico and either got sent away or turned away each time. And through miracle, in July, maybe June of last year, a friend had just moved to Los Angeles and she knew I was struggling and she said, "Hey, do you want to come out to LA?" And at first I was terrified. No, I don't. But it was either that or I was going to die. And I'd already tried taking my life 3 times by that point and it didn't seem to be working. So I kind of figured, like, if I can't die, I might as well figure out how to live. so, um, so I just Googled LGBTQ treatment Hollywood. And the first place that popped up happened to answer the phone. And they told me what insurance to get. And now I'm almost 6 months sober. So that's a very long answer, but also a very short way of squishing all that together.
But a very powerful message that needs to be said. And so I'm glad that you're taking us through this with you because I think that's setting the arena, for what's to come with your show. This question, maybe backtracking a little bit with your timeline,
Okay.
but it's still something very important. And you mentioned so many of us may know bits and pieces of this, but for the people that are meeting Uncle Paul for the first time, tell us a little bit about Paul's world. You had your father's passing, you've had AJ's disappearance and your recovery, which is put you on the map put you on the direction that you're going. So tell us a little bit about that.
You know, there was a lot that happened from December of 2020. So we're going back 4 years, but December of 2020 to April of 2021, my father passed. I didn't get to go see him. I didn't get to go see him. I didn't end, but a relationship with the only man I've ever truly been in love with, which was not my ex-husband, ended. He moved out, and then AJ went missing. Um, Now, as right before AJ went missing, I signed it into treatment. I was doing an outpatient program in Albuquerque because I needed to stop using, and I needed to grieve the relationship and my dad's passing. But as I'm in the middle of that, AJ goes missing. And I am working, so I'm working full time. I'm trying to do recovery, full time, and I'm trying to solve a murder full time. Obviously, that wasn't going to work. So I put a mask on someone else, my family, and I left treatment to, throw myself into AJ full time. Now it was an easy, I I don't know if I would truly use the word easy, but it was an out. It was a way out for me not to have to grieve my dad and my ex. And it was a, I don't want to say it's convenient. These are horrible words to describe it, but I hope you understand that it was a way to just pivot away from the pain. Because at the time, I didn't know AJ was murdered. I didn't know all this deep stuff. He was just missing. Um, and because I wasn't in Houston, where I'm from and where my family is currently, I threw myself into social media. I figured I'd be the face of the movement while they're out on the ground because I couldn't be there. Um, so I took to TikTok, which I was still fairly new at, and started telling our story. It started getting a little traction, and then between May and December, like the story took off, and then my account got banned, and then my second account got banned. The account that most people know of me is my third account. Um, and those like they had a fraction of the following I have now. We just kind of blew up overnight. Um, and in that process, a lot of people have come to me and said, "Hey, Uncle Paul, can you share my story? Can you help me? You've got your story out. Can you do the same for me?" And I'm not generally in the mindset of saying no. I'm getting better at it now. But at the time, I felt like I had to say yes to everybody, or else I'm just like a horrible person. Um, so I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it may take us in the right direction. I threw myself into being a social justice advocate. Um, And some of that was for selfish reasons. Some of that was because I didn't want to deal with the pain of my dad's death and the end of a relationship that started very, very, very beautifully and ended in a very, very dark note.
I I personally would not use the word selfish. Um, in this case, I think that naturally we're going to be looking for distractions, to try to not face something, and I feel like that falls into what we're taught in society. That men's not allowed to feel anything. Mental health isn't a real thing. You fight it out in the front yard for a few minutes, and then you get up and you walk away, and you're done with it. We are just now getting to a place where we can give ourselves permission to accept when our brain isn't feeling good. And we have a long way to go, but we're getting there. So I personally can never attach the word selfish to you, especially with that. So I don't know if that means anything to you or not, but just my non-professional 2 cents.
I appreciate that. I take it.
One thing that I really get intrigued with you and admire and love the openness about is your visions and the gift that you have.
Oh,
With research that
forgotten about that. Um, Now that's a whole nother thing. That's just kind of I don't want to say it's shown up. Well, I mean, it has shown up the past few years, but I'm learning that it didn't just come out of nowhere. It's kind of always been there. I just think it was easier for me to kind of turn it off or doubt it or say that it's not that. And I believe what David is saying is, I hate the term psychic medium, y'all. I really hate it. But when I say that, people know what I mean. Um, I saw my nephew's murder. I've had visions about people. I can touch someone and know their trauma. I've gone through like random TikTokers that I've never met, and I can tell you what's in their closet, and they're crying over a dress in their closet, and um, it is it's both a blessing and a curse at times. But I'm learning to harness it in a way that propels me forward. Um, because I think a lot of times, especially in my using, it was a way to kind of hold me back. Um, and for me, when I'm using, my gift is like on steroids. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Because I see enough as it is when I'm sober. Um, that when I'm high, I see much further into whatever it is on that other side, and I really don't want to see all that. Um, like I said, it's oftentimes a blessing and a curse. I didn't necessarily want to see my nephew's murder, but without that, I may not have found the crime scene. Like, for those that don't know, I don't think I've said it in any podcast, but those that are new here, I literally drew my nephew's crime scene without knowing he was murdered, and that still creeps me out. I get really creeped out often by my gift. It's cool at the same time, but like it gives me goosebumps. When I know things about people and they're confirmed by them, it still gets to me. Um, I don't know if that answered your question or if there was a
Yeah,
question.
no, no, absolutely did. Because I feel like it'll be an ongoing thing that we continue to talk about. So
But
I will say that I have a famous psychic friend in the true crime world, and I'm not going to name drop or anything like that, but I believe, and I didn't know how much I believed until I met her, and but what I have found with some reading that I've done and with the direction that she has led me to, because one of her questions to me is if I ever felt as if I had a gift. And I never really thought about it, but it is very common that people who have went through trauma and addiction and abuse and those unimaginable things that you just don't think happens in real life, that you just see on a movie, it does something. It opens up their minds and what is that whole saying of, we only use a certain percentage of our brains. Imagine if we used, and I always think too, like when you see babies, they always say babies can see ghosts, babies can see, but babies haven't been taught yet that that's weird and not normal, and you shut up about it,
mm,
and I think that something happens to people where their brain awakens to things and what I do love is when I've seen you in action with it, you don't say stuff to be saying stuff. I've seen people log in on, TikTok live or whatever to talk with you and you've said "I'm not getting anything." You're not just going to tell somebody something thinking that it saves your face. And I really admire that. And I think that what is so great about people doing the things that we do, and not that I'm not saying that I have a gift, I'm just saying in general with what we do is we're trying to break those stigmas. We're trying to break we're trying to break the negative thoughts on things and talk about the hard things.
mm. It's
You
funny you
know,
say that. Funny you say that because being a gay man of primarily Mexican descent, I get some discrimination in one of those, but the most discrimination I get is for being an intuitive. I get the most, I get more discrimination towards me for that than I do anything else, even by people of color or people in the LGBTQ community. The first week of treatment in rehab, I was bullied because they overheard me tell someone that I was a psychic. And even though I was reading him perfectly and knowing things about him, they made fun of me and ostracized me for the first week, and I almost left because of that. Because even in a place that's all LGBTQ people, because it is, they found the one thing that made me different. And
right?
obviously, we've squashed it. I love them.
Sure.
I owe my life to them. But just calling a spade, I got bullied the first week because of that. Now, funny enough, some of those people that bullied me are my closest friends now. So, everything happens for a reason. I needed that to learn to stand up for myself and to not let people stigmatize a gift that I have that I had no choice over.
Yeah,
And,
and I think that what happens with people like us that are out and proud, and I don't mean that as just as far as our sexual orientation, but everybody in my life knows that I'm a survivor, and I will tell you the story, and I will tell you the dark details. I will tell you what I've done to get through it, and I will tell you when I've hit a pothole, you know. And but what happens is people want to immediately put us into a box
Yeah.
and shy away from it because they know we see something. They know that we're going to say something that's going to make them think, and that scares the hell out of them.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
so we've had to stop taking it personally, right? Like that, like your issue with me being vocal about my trauma has nothing to do with me and my trauma. It's you trying to keep things buried down, and I won't let you next to me. I
Ding,
won't
ding,
let you
ding,
do
ding, ding,
that.
ding, ding.
Yeah, yeah. So again, it's doing that hard work. It's normalizing these conversations, you know.
It's tough, especially when it comes to spiritual things, like because not everyone is a believer. You know, I've got friends that are atheists that think I'm just cuckoo for cocoa puffs when it comes to that, and I can literally predict something like very specific on paper, and they will just turn the other way. So, it's I've learned to kind of pick my battles in that regard. And I do my best not to hold back my gift, but I also learn when to just stop. If someone's not wanting to be read, and I do my best to ask people if I can read them before I do it because it's not always fair to just walk up to someone and know everything about them. Um, um, and there are a lot of people, you're right, that don't want to be seen. They've curated, they've spent their lives curating this image. So for them to know that someone can see past that can be very terrifying for them. So, and oftentimes folks like me, folks like you, because I do think you have a gift, Mr. David. Um, I do think you're just as gifted. Um, Otherwise, I don't think you would be doing the surviving podcast. But I think you're absolutely right. If people aren't ready to go there, you're going to become the enemy simply because you're comfortable going. We're going to become the enemy.
Accepting trauma, accepting the hard times is that's a whole other podcast on its own, right? So tell us a little bit about your experience when you got out of treatment and with you healing from your trauma.
Whew, that is a lot. Now I did 30 days inpatient and I did 60 days outpatient, which is the recommended full treatment, 90-day treatment. Um, Getting out of inpatient, I don't know why, but I expected after I did my little stint inside that because if you've ever gone to treatment, they do like a graduation or a coin out on your last day. They'll have the staff and the clients circle around, and they'll go around a circle and give you a little kind of, it's like an AA chip basically. And they go around and tell you something good about yourself, generally speaking. Mine wasn't so much like that. Mine was, we don't know who you are. We don't think you're going to survive. You're likely not going to stay sober. So when I left treatment, I was just crushed because I'm like, it, I, my mind, even though I'm learned not to trust it all the time, my mind was telling me, see, you just failed. You did all that for nothing because they don't even think you can stay sober. That's not exactly what they said. It was more, they were more expressing their concern that I didn't, uh, as one of the clinicians said, like we've only barely scratched the surface because there is so much there. Um, I don't like to play comparative trauma, but I've been around long enough to know that I've got more trauma than the average bear. So, um, to piggyback on that, I remember being at a 12-step meeting, and I've been in and out of 12-step meetings my entire life, and only recently, the past few years, heard my story. Um, and I remember asking the speaker that afterwards. I asked her, I'm like, why do you think that is? That I've never heard my story before, and I'll never forget it. She said, Paul, because most of us don't survive. And I was like, whoo. But she's absolutely right. So I say that to say it was very fair of them to say that we've only scratched the surface because there's so much there. I went in, trying to heal from AJ, but AJ's loss and murder. But that's just one bullet point of my life. There's 38 others um, that are equally traumatic, sadly. So I kind of used that as a challenge to propel me through the outpatient, and the outpatient was much harder than the inpatient. I'm grateful I stuck it out. Um, a little aside though, the moment I got out of outpatient, I don't know why, but I made a TikTok about this one artist who meant the world to me. I'm not going to say their name, but they mean the absolute world to me. I would listen to their music when I was in Albuquerque, and I would just cry on my way to my dealer's house because I was just so damn broken. And it would be like day 3 or 4, and I was just needing sleep. I needed sleep, but my brain wanted more dope. So I'd be driving to my dealer's house, playing their music, and just crying and praying for the strength to turn the car around. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but I would always be listening to their music. So, and then when I got out of treatment, for whatever reason, I made a video about them, just thanking them. Never met them, well, up until a couple days ago. So cut to my big surprise when I walk in and someone stands up and they're just like, I'm so and so, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going to tell you my story. And I'm just looking like, am I fucking dreaming right now? Like, do 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 do. It's one of those just moments that I've had so many moments like that in recovery in Los Angeles, but it's just one of those like little breadcrumb kind of moments. I call them breadcrumbs from God that just lets me know I'm going the right way. Um, yeah, I don't remember what the question was, but it's been a journey. It's been a journey, and it still continues. And there are some really really good moments like that, and there are some moments that aren't so good. And I'm learning to balance both of them without turning to drugs, because I know in my history the happy joyful moments can be just as triggering as the bad sad mad moments.
I know that throughout your journey, AJ has played a huge factor in it, and I know that throughout this podcast, your new podcast, we'll get details and updates. Your TikTok does it. Your previous podcast does it, and but even just today in the last few minutes, there's a phrase that you used twice that really stands out to me, and you say surviving the journey. And something that I would like for you to touch on, and I know it seems like we're bouncing back and forth on a lot of things, but that's just the way these shows work, right? When you're talking about trauma doesn't have a timeline. It's just bits and crumbles of things. And so when you mention the word or the phrase surviving the journey, we have already touched a little bit on, you know, what you've been trying to do to get answers for AJ. What has it been like with cops and authority figures and the people that growing up we wanted to be as little boys? Where you see a person in uniform and you just immediately trust them, but then something happens to a lot of us, and that is gone.
Well, I would put a little asterisk by that statement, because I think that's true for both of us. But I know, being the advocate that I am, that that's not true for every child, particularly children of color, particularly Black children. They don't necessarily feel safe when they see a cop or want to be them. So I just want to put that out there, that we're only speaking for our experience and not for everyone's experience. Now, to say that though, mine is a it's that is true, but it's also a little deeper for me because after my brother was murdered, my dad kind of disappeared from my life. He would make an appearance here or there, but he wasn't active in my life, for the majority of it. And then my mom, my mom loved cops, especially Houston police. HPD, my mom loved a man in uniform, and she loved dating cops. So I grew up with these as kind of father figures in that way. Like my mom would date them, and then not only that, when she wasn't dating them, and she was going through her periods of domestic violence and getting the shit beat out of her, and I had to call 911. HPD was always the ones that showed up and would comfort me. So I I always had such a great respect for them because they were always the ones that kind of saved my day. And I looked particularly up to the men as kind of these father figures that I really didn't have. Um, so cut to me calling them to get help for AJ and them calling me shameless and vile. I can't even tell you the mind fuck that that is. Like, um, it feels like a parent abandoning me. Man, I can only imagine how AJ felt, being abandoned because his story is a lot about abandonment. Um, and then to have the mayor of Houston, who I like championed, um, championed, imply that he didn't care about AJ, to just brush us off, and then to have Lena Hidalgo, bless her heart, another person. She's the Harris County judge. Historic, she's like the first Latina judge of Harris County, one of the largest counties in the country. I championed her too. I thought it was so amazing. I defended her during COVID, and her office couldn't even call me back. They had her lawyer reach out to me. So, having said all that, I know everything happens for a reason, and I know I'm supposed to be in this position, but it doesn't always feel good. And there's a lot of feelings of abandonment and a lot of it's like when HPD turns its back on me and my family, I feel like I'm back in that spot where I'm calling the cops because my mom's getting the shit beat out of her. But this time, they're just looking the other way. I don't know. It takes me back to a very dark time in my place and in my life, and it just feels like the story is being rewritten in a very dark way. And I don't know how else to articulate that. Um, Other than that, it just feels like these father figures, these heroes, they were all like fake. It was all false. It wasn't true. I was looking up to the wrong people. That's what it feels like now. Because I'm not gonna lie, I don't have a ton of respect for Houston police after all of this. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and see you.
I don't like my Wi-Fi just completely turned off. Something does not want us to record this or to finish this. Um,
We were doing
okay.
so good.
I know we got half of it, or maybe more. Um, y'all, we've had so many issues. I've never had this many issues. Well, that's a lie. That's a lie. The last time I tried telling my story on my podcast, um, and this was at the time I had very expensive podcasting equipment. This audio was complete trash. It's the only episode that sounds like trash. We recorded it twice because the audio was so bad. And side note, if you listen to the audio on YouTube, I swear you can hear AJ's murder. I, I know that sounds crazy, but go listen to it. Go listen to it and listen to the back. You can hear police, you can hear screaming, you can hear gunshots. I had a monitor on. So if anything was coming through, I would hear it. I heard nothing. Anywho, that's a whole nother. So I do believe there is something spiritual that doesn't want me to get this stuff out, but we're just going to rebuke that in the name of Jesus and keep it moving. What I was saying was that the authority figures turning their backs on me and my family um, gave me a lot of empathy, particularly for those in the Black Lives Matter movement, because this is oftentimes the way folks of color, particularly those with more melanin, feel with authority figures because they're oftentimes their lives don't matter to those in authority. AJ's life hasn't yet to matter to anyone in authority in Houston. Um, Anyone. And AJ happened to be black. He was also an addict, and he also had, a troubled past. Nothing super crazy if we're really going there. Um, Petty crimes, nothing crazy, but he's been treated like garbage from the jump. And by extension, my family's been treated like garbage from the jump as well.
Well, and I want to say I'm glad that you gave the asterisk when you did about what you gave it on, but I want to say that I worded that question specifically for that because there's a part two to that. I don't want it to appear, especially with the little glitch that we had, and I don't want it to appear as if I don't recognize, understand, or know certain privileges.
Sure.
And I lead with being a white man. Now, when they find out I'm gay, it's a little different, but I lead being white. And so I asked that question specifically the way I did for that response to lead into this question. And this is the hard question, but we're here to talk about the hard things. And how does race, demographic, addiction, uh, class play into AJ's case?
Ooh, that is a very, very loaded question. Um, well, there's a number of reasons. There's from the jump, because AJ was wearing an ankle monitor, he's immediately deemed a criminal. Now, keep in mind, this was a pre-trial ankle monitor. What that means is he's been charged with the crime. He's not being convicted of anything. He was awaiting a court date, which is why the stipulations on the ankle monitor weren't that strict, because he's not a criminal. He hasn't been he's been charged. He hasn't been convicted. Um, but because he had it on, he's automatically painted as a criminal. So the moment my sister calls him missing, oh no, he just cut it off. He doesn't want to be found. He's a runaway. They assume he did the wrong thing. My sister's claims of him being missing, the family intuition has always been denied from the jump. Now, can I say specifically because he was black or because he was a criminal? No, there hasn't been anything that has been so overt, but I know in my heart a lot of covert racism, covert classism, covert, I don't know what the word is when you're going after like addicts, but that just the stigmatization. Also, where was I going? Also, there's been cases in Houston because Houston has a huge crime problem. I don't care what statistics they put out there. When they say the homicide rate is going down, keep in mind they've yet to call AJ's disappearance a homicide because we have no body and they're completely looking away from all the evidence we do have. We know AJ's been killed. But statistically, he's just missing. So when Harris County, Houston puts out this homicide rate going down, just know they don't count everything as a homicide. So I say that to say there was a shooting of a black rapper in Houston um, with a lot of money, and his killer was caught like that. Just and given like $1 million bond. That's almost unheard of in Houston. Killers don't get high bonds; they get like $1 bond and get let out with an ankle monitor, like the case of Frank DeLeon killing Diamond Alvarez and literally being at home awaiting trial for murder wearing an ankle monitor. So how that plays into AJ's case is very, very covert, but it definitely shows up. Definitely shows up. Because if you see, there are certain pictures that if I put up of AJ, I can already tell you the comments are going to be, oh, well, he just looks like trouble. And it's usually him with the grill in his mouth, because that's culturally cool. Um, or he's throwing up, quote unquote gang signs. You can see in the comments, oh, well, another punk N-word, glad he's gone, that kind of thing. So it does show up. It shows up.
The fact that even if it isn't said out loud by anybody, it doesn't have to be. When a family knows the fact that you have done more of an investigation than people who are assigned to do these investigations, like that speaks volumes, you know. Um, you've already kind of touched on this, but I feel like we could dive in a little bit more just to maybe take a moment to almost lighten the mood a little bit because like I mentioned in the beginning,
Sure.
we're going to be on an emotional roller coaster with this. That's just what it is. But because of your loyalty, your allyship, your your agenda, your goals with AJ, the title Uncle Paul was just organically given to you by the people that follow you. So tell us who Uncle Paul is to these followers, these people, to these friends. I don't even like to use the word followers. I mean, they're your friends, they're your people.
You're absolutely right. Now I can't tell you what they think of me, or what they see me as, but the feeling I get is there's a lot of hope placed on me. And that's oftentimes hard for me to take. Um, there's a lot of love shown to me, and it took me a long time to feel like I was worthy, because when I'm shooting up all the time, it's hard for me to accept love. Now I'm not doing it today, but there are days my imposter syndrome comes into play, and I look at my following, and I'm just like, "Oh, you think you're somebody with your 117,000 followers? Oh, if they knew who you really were, they would just stop following you." Or I look at my views, when they're low, and like, see, it's all fake. You're nobody. You're really nobody. Um, there are days I don't feel worthy of it, and there are days I have to remind myself that I'm very blessed to have the following I do, the friends I do. I've made a lot of friends on social media. Met a lot of friends through TikTok. Ryan, I call her Ryan Angel in my phone, but Ryan knows who she is. She's been by our side since day one. I've never met her in person. But if I need something, she's gonna go to her bin verified or choose finder. She's gonna give me a background check on so and so. Like, she's not getting paid to do any of this. Like, um, she just feels connected to us, and that's just one case. There's Andrea, who found me on TikTok, and she checks in with me almost every day, and she has been since, especially on the really dark days. And when when I often feel alone, I have to remember that there are people out there that care about me, and they care about AJ.
You created a beautiful platform, and I know that you wear the Uncle Paul Pat badge, as a badge of honor, the Uncle Paul title as a badge of honor, as it should be. And
I
I knew.
do. I also carry a lot of responsibility that goes with that. I try to remember at the end of the day that my name is at Justice for little AJ. So I do my best to honor AJ at the end of the day. Because I'm very politically active, but I do my best not to bring that to TikTok. Um, I do my best not to make it. Now, I do struggle with it, I'll be honest, but I do my best to keep the focus for everyone. I want people, when they come to this platform of mine, no, I don't even call it mine. I've said this from the jump. It's our platform. This is our account. I've never said my account. I don't like that. Because just as easily as I was given this platform, I've been banned before, so I know it can easily be taken away. So I try and acknowledge and respect that every moment, and remember that this is our platform, and that at the end of the day, I want everyone with a good heart to feel welcome here, whether they're, struggling with addiction, struggling with the lifestyle, whatever. I want them to feel welcome here. Now, I ain't got no time for racists. You're not welcome here. If, like I said, anyone with a good heart, I want them to feel like they're represented here, because AJ, at the end of the day, had a heart of gold. So I try and put him at the center. And even if you look at the my new podcast artwork, AJ is at the top of it. Like, he's like, it's superimposed there, because I wouldn't have the platform without AJ. I wouldn't have the platform without the followers. So I try and always honor that, or do my best to.
Well, you're doing great. And when you need those reminders, I'm glad that I'm part of the group that gets to remind you that you've got some cheerleaders, man. And as we start to bring this to an end, I would love to know what would justice be for you and AJ?
Oh, that's a question from God. I know that much. That's my higher power showing up, honey. Because I've thought about this. I've thought about this a lot. And I think for most of my family, and I can speak to this, most of my family sees justice as an arrest and as charges, and that. And obviously that's part of it. Um, That's a big part of it, not to trivialize that. But for me, justice for AJ is it's breaking the generational curses that led AJ to fall through the cracks. Because he's not the first in my family to fall through the cracks. He's the second. My brother lost his life in eerily similar circumstances. I mean, the parallels between their two murders give me goosebumps. So I firmly believe in generational curses, and I think if they were acknowledged then, and if folks fought harder against their own addiction, against our own mental health struggles, against generational poverty, if we fought harder, maybe AJ would still be here. But also, this is, we're here. I mean, we're here. We can't change the past. But I'm doing my damnedest to change the way our story ends, because my baby AJ's story doesn't end with him dying by a fence for 41 hours. That's not how his story ends. His story will end when I stand up on my 1 year sober birthday in Hollywood and tell his story. That's where his story. For me, damn you. For me, that's justice for AJ. Justice for AJ is getting that 1 year sobriety chip, and then that 2 year, that 3 years, and showing the little AJs that are coming behind him that they don't have to turn to that life. Like, that there is a way out. Now, for me, I didn't have that. There were no trailblazers. I mean, don't get me wrong. My mom blazed a little trail. She got closer than anyone else got. Um, but I'm the first in my family to graduate high school. I'm the first to get a college degree. I'm the first to move out of the state of Texas and Houston. And I hate to say this, but I'm the first to follow my dreams. And I don't know if it's because folks feel so shackled by their trauma that they don't know that they're worthy of that, or what. But I do know it's hard. It's hard to believe that you can do something if you've never seen anyone do something. That's why representation matters. Like, because if you can see it, you can believe it. And at the end of the day, my mom, for all her faults, always allowed me to dream. So I always knew I was going to end up in Hollywood. But because God's got jokes, I ended up in Hollywood in rehab. So I always knew I was going to end up in Hollywood. Ask anyone I went to high school with, and they would tell you, Paul's going to Hollywood. So every time,
Getting there was going to be easy.
no,
No one
No.
ever says that.
no, you didn't. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful you brought that up, because I know if I'd come here 20 years ago, I would have crashed and burned. I'm very different than I was then, because now I've got a mission and I've got a passion and I've got voice. And go back to the question of what justice for AJ is going to look like, what it is. Like I said, it's breaking those generational curses. So that AJ, God willing, is the last young man that thinks that he has to turn to drugs to make money or to feel good or to deal with his trauma, because his mother died. Now, my sister's his biological mother, but the first mother he knew died. And his trauma was never addressed. My uncle, God bless him, he fell deeper into his opioid addiction. Nobody ever addressed AJ's trauma.
Man, that's some deep, heavy stuff. But just like no one told you the path to Hollywood is going to be easy, you've never told anybody this show is going to be easy.
No, I'm not here, Sonny. Get you a clean box of Kleenex, because you're going to be crying when you listen to this one. But
But I even through this conversation, like I still feel empowered. I feel good after, because it shows I'm not alone. It shows that we have warriors, and we are a warrior, and damn it, we're surviving. We're survivors, and And I think that I know that that's the point of my show, and I know that that is the point of yours too. And so before I get to my last question that I think is going to be really fun to kind of end on a fun note,
Oh,
is there anything else that today that you feel you need to say?
whew. Yes. Can I say it in a way that doesn't take another 4 hours? I need my listeners to know that it's perfectly okay to tell people to leave you alone and to get out of your life. That no one has the right to demand presence in your life. Um, if they're not feeding your spirit or feeding you or paying your bills, if they're not building you up, you have every right to say goodbye and to leave me alone. And if they come back to haunt you a year later, you have every right to be angry. It's okay. Anger is okay. As long as you're not hurting anyone with your anger or hurting yourself, it is okay to be angry and to call out people that don't respect your boundaries. That's what I'm dealing with today is my boundaries being violated consistently by a certain person. And because this person has a platform and because they do what I do on a larger scale and because they've helped us, I feel like they almost feel like they're entitled to be in my life. And this person has brought me down so many times um, and lied to me so many times that they are not welcome in my life. And I got sober without them. In fact, had they still been in my life, I likely would not have. And so them trying to come back in when I got 6 months sober is not going to happen. So, yes, audience, you're allowed to cut people out of your lives and celebrate that. And if they try to come back, you're allowed to say no.
Absolutely. This quote will be uh, directed in a little bit of a different way than what you were just speaking of with the individual you were speaking about. But one of the things I told my partner when we got together, and that we repeat, on a regular basis, is sometimes loving me means leaving me alone, and that could be a temporary thing. That could be a 5 minute thing. It could be a 5 hour thing, 5 day thing. Sometimes it's a forever thing, and that's okay. When someone asked me in an interview that I did not too long ago, they asked me, when did everything change for me? Like, what piece of advice did I have of that aha moment that if I could say one thing to anybody, what would it be? And my answer to that, I'm getting chills right now because I remember like it just came out of me without me even thinking of it. I was like, oh, that must mean something, But the moment I started giving myself permission, changed everything. When I gave myself permission to feel good, when I gave myself permission to feel bad, when I gave myself permission to feel angry and realize there's empowerment in those feelings and it's nothing to shy away from, everything changed.
Mm. Can I tell you the moment for me?
That was gonna be my question is what is that moment for you?
There are so many, but the more recent one that caused, I think, the most change was when I was walking through a bayou in Houston looking for AJ. And I was with this young psychic man, who was young, way younger than me. And I remember him looking at me and he says, "You're so gifted. You just doubt yourself." And it's not the first time I've heard that, but there was just something about being in that bayou on a hot Houston humid day looking for dead bodies. I know. Um, that it just the switch flipped. Next thing I know, I'm seeing visions. I'm hearing things. They're corroborated by people. I'm standing up in front of the mayor and giving him a very professional piece of my mind. Who the fuck this is? I have a platform. Like I grew up with incredible social anxiety, so the idea of getting up in front of city council and talking when I can't even say my name during attendance,
Yeah.
that just changed everything. Just when he said I doubt myself, and then I just stopped doubting myself. There ain't nothing I can't do, baby.
Listen, but isn't it crazy when because you said so many people have said this to you, but it just takes that the right environment, the right place, and the right person to when you believe it and you
Yeah.
have that moment of oh shit, you know.
And there was another one recently. One more, because I got to be extra. I have to have two. But there was more recently as I was transitioning from inpatient to outpatient treatment, and there was a therapist there, a beautiful Latina woman who happens to be trans. Um, and I was just telling her that I'm just having a hard time relating because I mean I'm from Houston. I'm coming to LA where it's very image obsessed. You look a certain way, you act a certain way, you have this kind of haircut, like. And she just looked at me and she just said two words, but coming from her, she just said, "Be yourself." And hearing a Latina trans woman who walks around the world, because I believe that trans people are some of the most courageous people in this country. So to hear her tell me to be myself, it just bam, like, and I don't know, I call her my spiritual big sister, because I think she is, because I see so much of my family in her, like the good side of my family. So for her to give me permission to be myself, to be Paul from poverty, that he's a little chubby sometimes, he's got a lisp and all this stuff. Permission to be myself in the good stuff too. Like, permission to be an intuitive and all that, and to feel overwhelmed and to feel sensitive and like give me permission to just be me in a city that can sometimes be very fake was very empowering.
Damn, what a good conversation. I have one last fun question that I want to ask you, but before I do, I have a bit of a monologue. I'm
Monologue.
so proud of you, and I get to call Uncle Paul my friend. Like, how great is my life? I
David,
admire you. I've seen you at some low points throughout the year, following you and being a friend, and but you are looking better than I've ever seen you. You've got that spark back. You've got that want to back, and please promise me and all of your Uncle Paul friends and followers and lovers and supporters and all of us, you promise us that you will at least do your damnedest to take care of yourself and put yourself first.
I can promise you I'm doing that. Yeah, especially right now because because of some challenges I've already mentioned. I'm doing that right now. People have got to learn to respect my boundaries, and they have to, or they're not going to be in my world. That's just how it is, and I'm okay with that these days, which is a miracle in and of itself. To be okay with saying no. I don't owe anyone anything except for AJ because I made him a promise. But other than that, I owe no one anything. And I'm okay with owing no one anything. Well, except for my student loans, but that's a whole other thing. Girl, girl.
I think this is the third podcast we've created just in this conversation. We'll record that episode next. Gosh.
Right. Well, also to piggyback on something you said, or that the audience doesn't know, we did like 3 different episodes of David's podcast, and I was just going through it. I remember like after the first episode, I broke down crying because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. Um, it, and it's nothing you did. I wasn't ready to dive into all that. Um, and yeah, I think we did 3 episodes, but it was just a mess. It was a very much a mess.
And just so the listeners know, don't go looking for it. We didn't release it. It would not have been a healthy place for Paul. I always want to say I want to be part of the recovery and not the trauma.
Mm.
And if I was one of those clout chasing podcasts distributing people that some
Mm.
of us know, I would have
Mhm.
released it. And but I wouldn't. I put it into a file. We conversed about it, and we made the decision together that we were deleting it. It would not have been good. It would not have been healthy. And I refuse to ever be nothing but a healthy, loving, bright part of your life. And if you ever
Come on, Bright.
If you ever need a reminder of any of those things, I need you to call me and I will tell you all about it.
David. Well, I guess this is the perfect place to end. Um,
So the last
Felt like
question,
5 minutes of a conversation, but
yeah,
or
the
did you
last
have?
question I'm going to ask you
Oh,
before you close out, it just to end on a fun note,
okay.
because things are happening, balls are rolling, balls are moving. Um,
David, you have no idea.
um, I had this question set aside to ask you when you recorded on my show because it's something I always like to end on, and I never got to ask you.
Okay.
So I'm asking you today. When there is a movie about you and your life and justice for AJ, who could you see playing AJ and who could you see playing you?
Oh God, that is such a hard question. Um, that is a hard question. I've never been asked that question, and I don't know that I've ever even thought about it.
Well, if we
Um,
need to put a pin in it, we can. But
AJ. Well, here's the thing: is AJ was a young, half Mexican, half black man, or Creole, half Creole. Um, And I don't know any of the upcoming actors right now because, I've been doing my thing for a few years now and I'm old, so I don't know who these youngins are coming up. Um, but maybe like one of the Jackson cousins, because they kind of got that like they're light skinned with the pretty hair, because AJ had a little kinky hair. So maybe one of the Jacksons, but the cousins, because one of the Jackson cousins is playing Michael in the new movie. Um, and they're really some of them are fair skinned, so I'm thinking of Jackson. Because that's the only thing I can think of right now. For me, I want to say Mario Lopez, because but who would I see playing me? Um, okay, I can't answer this question because I don't know the actors. But if I can rephrase the question, um, if I've ever seen, I'm gonna instead of an actor, I'll say the person I've ever seen or the character I've ever seen in a movie that I most connected with was the lead character of Perks of Being a Wallflower. I believe his name is Charlie. He wasn't gay, but if Charlie was gay, that's me to the T. From the gift to the trauma to the quirkiness to the love of old music, like that's me. Um, Constantly in his head. If you've not seen Perks of Being a Wallflower, go watch it. It's a great movie. It's a hard watch. It starts really like upbeat kind of teenage movie. I had no idea it was going to turn so dark, so be ready for that. Because it does not end on I mean, it ends on a happy note, but it took some sadness to get there, much like my life. Um, so, but Charlie in that movie, I think, would be like the closest I can see myself in a movie. As far as actors to play me, obviously, I look just like Channing Tatum, just like him. So we'll go with if there's a Latino, Channing Tatum.
well, you know what? I'm glad that we got to end a little bit on a smile, and that's what I was hoping for. Again, I am so honored that you wanted me to be a part of your first episode and interviewing you and sharing this moment with you. But I will now pass the hosting torch over to you and let you close us out.
Well, David, thank you so much for leading us here and for interviewing me and being able to go there into those kind of dark corners. I think you're very gifted with that, which is why I wanted you to be my interviewer because you're able to go into those dark corners with empathy. So when I feel like I'm walking into those kind of dark crevices of my life, I don't feel alone. Because I never want to feel like I never want people to feel alone in their pain or their trauma. Um, so you're very gifted with that, which is why I know you've been so successful and will continue to be. So thank you for taking your time to do this 85 times. Um, and through all the technical difficulties and everything, because something did not want us to record this show. Um, I'm going to edit it and put it out on Tuesday, God willing. No, not God willing. God will be willing. It will come out on Tuesday because I'm going to be consistent with delivering episodes. Um, is there anything else you want to say, or I don't know? I feel like there's. How are you feeling after all this?
I feel great. Like, I get so empowered with these conversations because we're controlling the narrative. We're taking back the control of our trauma. We're taking back the control of the hard times. We are putting ourselves on a path that is going to make us happy and inspiring people and building a team along the way. And so I always feel good ending starting and ending and being a part of this. And I'm just so proud of you. I can't wait to check out all the upcoming episodes and your show and supporting you. I'm a fan, I'm a follower, but damn it, I'm a friend, and I just love you.
I love you more. Thank you so much for doing this and for taking your time. Your time is very valuable. So, love you, David. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely love you, buddy.
I hope you enjoyed the first episode of In the Arena with Uncle Paul. Please, please, please share the show. Follow me on TikTok and Facebook. I'm Uncle Paul on both. Thank you for listening. And until next time, stay in the light.